The hosts of the 20th G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, calling it a total disgrace owing to alleged human rights abuses in the country. President Donald Trump said no US officials would attend the G20 summit in South Africa, reviving debunked claims of white Afrikaners being systemically killed and slaughtered in the country. Trump had announced in September that Vice President J.D. Vance would travel to the meeting later this month instead of him, but now said that US representatives would skip it entirely. He added that he looked forward to hosting the 2026 G20 summit in the United States, which the billionaire US president will controversially hold at his own golf resort in Miami, Florida. Okay, now joining us is Ayanuga Olugbenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst and he joins us live from Lagos in Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Ayanuga, pleasure to have you. Of course, this is an ongoing situation here with a surprising announcement from Donald Trump. We have, of course, seen him ambush South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in the Oval Office with these same claims. However, a huge development here on the international front. He announced the US boycott of G20 in South Africa after alleging abuses and a genocide of white Afrikaners. Is there any weight behind this, Ayanuga? Are Trump's claims credible?
Well, there is no iota of credibility or truth in Trump's claim. Every fact-checking organization had debunked the claim, not just the South African presidency or government, but everywhere the story had been checked and counter-checked, there is no element of truth in the story, and it is a terrible situation that the President Donald Trump is bringing U.S. into. And I believe that if President Donald Trump is not curtailed somehow, he is going to lead to the destruction of the U.S. empire and might in the world, because many of his utterances and behavior have shown to us that maybe he is an erratic fellow, and I want to believe that a lot of people in the U.S. government itself, amongst the rank and file, either Democrats or Republicans, don't agree with him, even though some of them may not publicly voice opposition to him. But I believe that a lot of them do not agree with his stance on this one. And coming at a time where China is showing more of the big brother and the good guy role all over the world with its Belt and Road projects, and also making friends from every corner of the earth, I believe that what U.S. will succeed in doing with some of these actions of President Donald Trump is to isolate the United States and make the United States feel like enemy of everybody else. And I don't think it's a good one for anybody, because as bad as anybody might think the U.S. is, they still seem to be one of the last bastion of democracy that, or strong bastion, not last, of democracy in the world that would help curtail the excesses of others. But President Donald Trump's actions in recent times is putting that in disrepute with his utter wanton and unchecked provocations. So for me, I just believe that if the African continent can unite, let it be a tit for tat.
Yes.
You don't. The next G20 meeting is going to be in the US, and he wants to host it in his resort. So if you don't come to the G20 summit in my country, I don't come to the G20 summit in your country. There is nothing more than that. And if African nations can form a solidarity and say, you can't keep accusing our brother and of things that did not happen
Ayanuga,
because it actually happened. Yes, I'm with you.
so of course, South Africa and Nigeria, these are two nations, of course you're joining us from Nigeria now, that have faced serious criticism from Donald Trump when it comes to if they're alleged or not, when it comes to the treatment of certain citizens. Of course, Nigeria has been slammed by the Trump administration for not protecting Christians in the country. Here, of course, we've seen Donald Trump take serious action, but of course he has also threatened military force in Nigeria as well. What kind of diplomatic message is this sent? Does Donald Trump's words, actions send to Africa and, of course, the broader global south?
Well, it's a message of non-credibility and trust him at your own peril, because it's showing that I'm a bully. I can make up any story to attack anyone that I want to, and don't come to me unprepared, because like you have said earlier on, he ambushed President Cyril Ramaphosa when he visited the White House earlier in the year. So he can ambush anybody. He will tell you, come, let's talk about this, and then you get there, he's talking about something else entirely that was not on the agenda. And it is a very terrible message that says, go to China, make friends with Russia, because US cannot be trusted at the moment.
Yes, do stay with us, Ayanuga, as we have some further updates coming out of the African continent next. The United Nations Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, has warned that traumatized civilians remain trapped in the Sudanese city of El Fasher in Darfur, with their exit being prevented. In a recent video message, he also highlighted continued atrocities going on in the city, including summary executions, sexual assault, and ethnically motivated violence, with mentions of disturbing developments in the nearby Kordofan region. Let's listen in to Volker Turk.
Now, traumatized civilians are still trapped inside the Sudanese city of El Fasher in Darfur, and they are being prevented from leaving. I fear that the abominable atrocities such as summary executions, rape, and ethnically motivated violence are continuing within the city. And for those who manage to flee, the violence doesn't end, because the exit routes themselves have been the scenes of unimaginable cruelty. At the same time, I issue a stark warning about events unfolding in Kordofan. Since the capture of El Fasher, the civilian casualties, the destruction and mass displacement there have been mounting. There is no sign of de-escalation.
Additionally, witnesses who have escaped the city have reported horrific violence during the RSF offensive. According to them, civilians were shot in the streets, while others were targeted by drone strikes. Let's listen in.
النساء والأطفال والناس الكبار بالسنانة ده تمام سلاح. لكن أكثر ناس ماتوا اللي ما مسلحين دي. أكثر ناس ماتوا الناس غير مسلحين. ليه؟ هم بجروا محل المضيقات عشان بطلوا بخش مع الحماية. بشوف هناك بالدرون ودق فوق الدبابة.
لما هم انقشت وقوة مشتركة إنسان جزء منها، والقوة مشترك القوات الشعب المسلح جزء منها في القيادة، باقي إلا مقاومة شعبية. المقاومة الشعبية ده زول اللي كلاش وناس المقاومة الشعبية البسيطين كانوا مساندين معهم. ديل الماتوا أكتر. أبرياء كان في البيوت، مواطنين كان في البيوت، وفي ناس ما مستطيع طلعوا جيروا برضه قتلهم في البيوت، وقتلها في شارع مناطق وسيارات والذخيرة كثيرة برضه.
درب بس ورجلهم تيت درب 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 درب. الآلة ماتت تقول تمه تمه تمه، الدي ما ماتت تمه، ولد الشتت ولد التجار فاتوا ويتقتلهم زيادة بالآلاف.
Ayanuga joins us once again to discuss this. Now, as we've heard from the Human Rights Chief of the United Nations, stressing that this needs more attention from the international community. The takeover of El Fasher by the RSF has seen reported horrendous human rights violations and atrocities committed by the RSF. of course, the United Nations has also warned that aid to Darfur is too slow and say hundreds have been killed in Al-Fasher. How urgent is this humanitarian situation on the ground, Ayanuga?
Well, it is a very dire and urgent situation that needs quick action if we don't want the massacre on the scale of Rwanda 94 to happen in Sudan. And this is the same way UN was calling the world's attention to it, and a lot of the power brokers who could help effect peace, look the other way or were too slow in acting because everybody's looking at what's in it for them. But this is a humanitarian crisis that should show our humanity first before the desire for profit or what's in it for us. And my heart bleeds every time I read or watch the situation in Sudan, in Congo, and several of the hotspots on the African continent where people of the same country rise up against each other in wanton killing and destruction of every fabric of humanity, because the bigger danger is not just the immediate killing now, but the structural destruction of a whole set of culture and way of life by this ethnically motivated killing that is going on in that country. And I hope that the African Union will not just be a paper tiger and will find a way to escalate its efforts to help in escalating the violence that is going on in El Fasher and the general Sudan, both in Cordovan, Darfur, and all the regions that are up in flames at the moment, and also in the Congo, so that we can have a semblance of humanity, in those areas, because many of these criminal elements, because I don't know what name to use for them. Again, you can call them liberation fighter or resistance forces, but they don't seem like that to me, because a lot of people who want to even escape the violence, their routes are being blocked and they are not allowed to escape the hotspots. Women, wantonly raped, children being abused, and a lot of horror stories coming out of there. I hope that even the UN itself will not just will do more than one. Yes, the UN is trying, but I believe that there are other cards that the UN can play to force the hands of powerful governments like Russia, like China, like the US to attend to this urgent situation, and then the general European community as a whole. Because don't forget that the continuance of this violence will also lead to migrant crisis in Europe that a lot of the European countries would not want at the end of the day. So the earlier they help mediate peace in these regions, the better it is for them.
Yes, Ayanuga Olugbenga, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Such great insight there. We now move on, and the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have announced that they have agreed on an economic pact in Washington. The agreement is aimed at boosting regional cooperation and attracting Western investment. Technical teams from both delegations initialized the Regional Economic Integration Framework, which outlines key areas for economic development between the two nations. The pact is expected to be signed by two presidents alongside a White House visit, though the date remains unconfirmed so far. The framework's implementation demands the full execution of an earlier agreement, including Rwanda's withdrawal from eastern Congo. It also requires neutralizing threats from the armed group Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda. The agreement aims to stabilize the region and unlock billions in investment in Congo's rich mineral sectors. We're now joined by Osanyin Taiwo, a policy and strategic implementation expert, and he joins us live from Abuja in Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Osanyin. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have signed this initial, are going to sign this initial pact in Washington. How meaningful is this step in the broader peace process in Central Africa?
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on NewsX World. Well, firstly, you must understand that the agreement between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda marks a very significant shift in regional diplomacy. Over the years, we've had tensions over cross-border security, trade disputes, and some resource control that has strained the relationship within these two countries. However, the economic pact that would be signed in Washington, even though the date has not been publicly announced, is not just an agreement, but an international mediation that probably signals a cautious yet strategic move towards reconciliation and mutual economic interdependence from these two nations. Not only that, it's also very important to state especially that this core pact also will focus on promoting trade amongst these two countries and even some parts of the region as well. Also, it's going to create a joint infrastructural development project, cross-border investment in areas such as agriculture, logistics, and even the minerals that are in the Republic of Congo, and also gives a design share prosperity, which is also very key for the for reconciliation and reduce any state of conflict in terms of this border instability. In addition, it's also a linkage between economic and peace building. So this is going to create a kind of a kind of political trust and economic collaboration from these two countries, creating a lessened friction of conflict that has become very heightened in the past few decades. Also, one of the things that is very critical about this pact is that it's going to also remain as a cautious pact of agreement in the Great Lakes region that have faltered in the past few months. So it will create enforcement. Not only that, it's going to create mutual interference, and also there will be a group of. It's going to create a kind of armed groups of collaboration, and also create a political will, not only in the east, not only in Rwanda and also in DRC, but also in the Eastern African Community, that is the EAC in general. Also, it's going to also broaden global impact and global implications, and also create a kind of forward-thinking approach that will also create a kind of closure from these two countries in the future.
Yin, thank you very much. Do stay with us as we have further updates to discuss.